The champagne tower caught the light like 1,000 tiny prisons, each glass reflecting the opulent ballroom in fractured, distorted pieces. I stood behind the catering station, my fingers cramping around the silver tray, watching Manhattan's elite glitter and laugh in their designer gowns and custom suits. The air was thick with expensive perfume, cigar smoke, and the particular scent of old money. Something like leather and amber, and absolute certainty. I didn't belong here. But then again, I never belonged anywhere that mattered. Olivia. My stepmother's voice cut through the classical music like a blade. Stop hiding behind that ridiculous tray and make yourself useful. I flinched, nearly dropping the champagne flutes I'd been arranging. Victoria Ashmore Chen had perfected the art of public humiliation, her words always just quiet enough that only I could hear the venom beneath the honey. Yes, ma'am. The words tasted like ash in my mouth, but I'd learned long ago that resistance only made things worse. And for God's sake, fix your hair. You look like you crawled out of a gutter. She swept past me in a cloud of Chanel No. 5, her diamonds catching the light like weapons. Remember why we're here. Isabel's engagement party. Try not to ruin it. As if I could forget. My stepsister Isabel held court in the center of the ballroom, draped in white silk that probably cost more than I'd earn in a year of working double shifts at the diner. She was beautiful in that cruel porcelain way, all sharp cheekbones and sharper smiles. And tonight, she was celebrating her engagement to a man I'd never seen, but whose name everyone whispered with a mixture of fear and fascination. Dante Moretti, the youngest Don of the Moretti crime family, a king in a city of wolves. I adjusted my ill-fitting black dress, a hand-me-down from Isabel that hung loose on my smaller frame, and weaved through the crowd with my tray of champagne. My feet ached in the too tight shoes Victoria had thrown at me this morning. Everything about me was wrong, ill-fitted, borrowed, a ghost haunting someone else's life. "Excuse me, miss?" The voice was warm, belonging to an elderly woman dripping in pearls. I offered her a glass with a practiced smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes. She didn't even look at my face before taking it. Invisible. That's what I was. What I'd always been since my father married Victoria 6 years ago, then promptly died in a car accident, leaving me at the mercy of a woman who saw me as nothing more than an inconvenient reminder of his first marriage. The ballroom doors opened, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. Even the string quartet seemed to play softer, as if the music itself was bowing to whatever had just entered the room. I felt him before I saw him. It was like a shift in atmospheric pressure, the moment before lightning strikes. My skin prickled, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I turned, compelled by some instinct I didn't understand. And then I saw him. Dante Moretti moved through the crowd like a shark through still water. Silent, purposeful, absolutely lethal. He was younger than I'd imagined, maybe 30 at most, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble by an artist who understood both beauty and cruelty. His suit was black, perfectly tailored to a body that spoke of controlled violence. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath, dark, almost black, and completely empty of warmth. 2 men flanked him, clearly security, their eyes scanning the room with professional paranoia. But no one was looking at them. Everyone was looking at him. Isabel rushed forward with a practiced squeal of delight, her white silk billowing around her like angel wings. She reached for him, but he caught her wrist before she could touch his face, holding it at a careful distance. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Something cold and measuring. "Dante, darling." Isabel's voice was sugar-sweet, but I heard the edge of nervousness beneath it. "Everyone's been dying to meet you, have they?" It wasn't a question. His voice was surprisingly soft, with just a hint of an accent that made every word sound like a threat wrapped in velvet. I should have looked away, should have kept moving, kept serving, kept being invisible. But I couldn't. He was terrifying and magnetic in equal measure, and I found myself frozen 3 feet away, still holding my stupid tray of champagne, staring at him like an idiot, and then he looked at me. Our eyes met across the crowd, and the world tilted on its axis. His gaze pinned me in place, dark and fathomless and so intense I forgot how to breathe. It lasted only a second, maybe two, before Isabel recaptured his attention, pulling him deeper into the crowd of admirers. But that second changed something fundamental in my chest, like a lock clicking open that I hadn't known was there. I stumbled backward, my hip hitting the edge of a table. The champagne glasses on my tray rattled dangerously, and I grabbed for them, but my hands were shaking too badly. "Careful, dear." An older man steadied my elbow, saving me from complete disaster. "Wouldn't want to waste good Dom Perignon?" I mumbled something that might have been thank you, and fled toward the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. What the hell was that? I'd never had such a visceral reaction to anyone in my life. It felt like standing too close to a fire, dangerous, consuming, impossible to look away from. The kitchen was chaos, white-coated staff rushing between stations, the air thick with heat and the smell of truffle oil and seared meat. I set my tray down with shaking hands and pressed my palms against the cool stainless steel counter, trying to steady myself. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus, one of the other catering staff, appeared beside me with a knowing smirk. "Let me guess, you met the groom?" "I didn't meet him. I just saw him." "Yeah, he has that effect on people." Marcus lowered his voice, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "My cousin works security at one of his clubs. Says Moretti's the real deal. Not the kind of guy who got his position through family connections. He earned it, with blood." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's dangerous, Liv, like actually dangerous. Not rich boy playing gangster dangerous. The kind of dangerous where people disappear and nobody asks questions." Marcus grabbed a fresh tray. "Your stepsister's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid for getting involved with him." I thought of Isabel's nervous smile, the way Dante had held her wrist like she was a thing he owned, rather than a woman he loved. "I don't think she had much choice," I said quietly. Marcus shrugged. "Nobody has choices when it comes to guys like that. They take what they want." He headed back toward the ballroom, leaving me alone with that terrifying thought. I should have stayed in the kitchen, should have hidden among the pots and pans until the party was over, and I could go home to my tiny room in the basement of the Ashmore mansion. But Victoria found me first. "There you are, you useless girl." She grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise, her manicured nails digging into my skin. "Get back out there, and smile for God's sake. You look like you're at a funeral." She shoved me toward the door, and I had no choice but to return to the glittering, suffocating ballroom. The party had shifted into full swing. People danced, drank, laughed too loudly. Isabel was surrounded by a gaggle of friends, showing off her engagement ring, a massive diamond that probably cost more than most people's houses. I didn't see Dante anywhere, and I told myself I was relieved. I picked up another tray and began making rounds, offering canapés to people who barely acknowledged my existence. My feet throbbed, my head ached. I fantasized about my narrow bed, my worn paperback books, the blessed silence of being alone. Champagne? I turned, smile automatically in place, and found myself face to face with one of Dante's security guards. He was enormous, easily 6'4", with the kind of build that spoke of serious gym time and possibly steroids. These are hors d'oeuvres, but I can get you." "Not for me." His voice was surprisingly gentle for someone so intimidating. "Mr. Moretti would like a word with you." My blood turned to ice water. "I'm sorry. What?" "Mr. Moretti. He wants to speak with you, privately." The guard gestured toward a hallway leading away from the ballroom. "This way, please." This had to be a mistake. Why would Dante Moretti want to speak with me? I was nobody. Less than nobody. "I think you have the wrong person." "Miss Olivia Chen?" The guard raised an eyebrow. "I don't make mistakes. How did he know my name?" Panic fluttered in my chest like a caged bird. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where would I go? "You didn't say no to men like Dante Moretti." Marcus's words echoed in my head. They take what they want. I set down my tray with numb fingers and followed the guard down the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The sounds of the party faded behind us, replaced by the clicking of my heels on marble and the rushing of blood in my ears. The guard stopped at a door, knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for a response. "Miss Chen, sir." I stepped into what appeared to be a private library, all dark wood paneling, leather-bound books, and the smell of old paper and expensive whiskey. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline. The city spread out like a carpet of lights, and standing at those windows, his back to me, was Dante Moretti. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. I was alone with him. "Do you know why I asked you here, Olivia?" His voice was quiet, almost conversational, but it sent shivers down my spine. He still hadn't turned around. "No, sir." My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. I raised my eyes and found him watching me in the window's reflection, his dark gaze cataloging every detail of my face, my body, my fear. "Come closer." My feet moved before my brain could protest, carrying me across the Persian rug until I stood a few feet behind him. This close, I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and dark, like sandalwood and sin. He finally turned, and the full force of his attention hit me like a physical blow. Up close, he was even more devastating. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, lips that looked cruel even in repose. But it was his eyes that held me captive. Intelligent, calculating, and completely devoid of mercy. "Tell me, Olivia," he said softly, taking a step toward me. "How long have you been stealing from your stepmother?" The world stopped spinning. The accusation hung in the air between us like smoke, choking me. My mind reeled, trying to process his words, trying to understand how this nightmare had become so much worse. I don't... The words tangled on my tongue. "I haven't stolen anything." Dante's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those obsidian eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or perhaps just confirmation of something he already knew. "No?" He pulled his phone from his pocket with a fluid motion, tapping the screen twice before turning it toward me. "Then perhaps you can explain these transfers from Victoria Ashmore's personal account. Small amounts. Never enough to trigger alerts. Always on Fridays when she reviews her weekly expenses." He tilted his head, watching me with the focused attention of a predator. "Clever, really, if you were actually guilty." The screen showed bank records, transaction histories, dates and amounts that made my stomach drop. Someone had been skimming money from Victoria's account for months. Thousands of dollars, taken in careful increments. That wasn't me. My voice was barely a whisper. "I don't even have access to her accounts. I know." The simple statement stopped my spiraling thoughts cold. I stared at him, confused, terrified, unable to understand what game he was playing. Dante pocketed his phone and moved to the bar cart, pouring amber liquid into 2 crystal glasses with practiced ease. "Your stepsister Isabel, on the other hand, has had access to her mother's account since she turned 18. She's been funding a rather expensive cocaine habit, among other things." The room tilted. I grabbed the back of a leather chair to steady myself, my fingers digging into the supple material. "Isabel has been very careful to make it look like you're the thief." He held out one of the glasses to me. "She's been setting you up for months, and tomorrow morning, Victoria plans to file charges against you for embezzlement and theft." "No." The word came out strangled. "No, that's not. Victoria would do exactly that." Dante's voice was matter-of-fact, almost bored. "She's already contacted her lawyers. You'll be arrested, charged, convicted. You'll go to prison, Olivia, and Isabel will continue bleeding her mother dry while you rot in a cell for crimes you didn't commit." I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in, the air too thick, too hot. This couldn't be happening. It couldn't be real. "Why are you telling me this?" I managed to choke out. "Why do you even care?" "I don't care." He said it so simply, so honestly, that it hurt more than cruelty would have. "But I have a problem, and you're going to solve it for me." He gestured to the chair I was gripping like a lifeline. "Sit down before you fall down. You look like you're about to faint." My legs gave out, and I collapsed into the chair more than sat in it. Dante remained standing, towering over me, completely in control while my entire world crumbled to ash. "Your stepsister is a liability." He took a sip of his whiskey, his movements precise and controlled. She's reckless, addicted, and fundamentally stupid. She believes marrying me will give her power, protection, unlimited money to fund her habits. She's wrong on all counts. Then why are you marrying her? The question escaped before I could stop it. His lips curved into something that might have been a smile on anyone else. On him, it looked dangerous. Because her mother owns something I need. A property in Brooklyn that's been in the Ashmore family for 3 generations. Victoria won't sell, but she will trade it for her daughter's security. A marriage alliance with the Moretti family. He finished his whiskey and set the glass down with a soft click. Unfortunately, the daughter in question is a walking disaster who will be dead from an overdose within 6 months, leaving me with nothing and Victoria with grounds to reclaim the property. My brain struggled to process what he was saying. This was insane. All of it was insane. I need a wife who won't embarrass me, won't steal from me, and won't end up in rehab or a morgue before the ink dries on our marriage certificate. Dante's dark eyes locked onto mine with laser focus. I need someone invisible, someone no one will miss, someone who understands what it means to survive. Understanding crashed over me like ice water. No. I stood up so fast the chair nearly toppled backward. No, absolutely not. I'm not. You can't. I can. He closed the distance between us in 2 steps, and suddenly he was right there, towering over me, his presence overwhelming every sense. And I will. You have 2 choices, Olivia. Tomorrow morning, you go to prison for crimes you didn't commit. You'll be convicted, sentenced to 5 to 7 years. You'll be 28 when you get out, with a record that ensures you'll never find decent work again. He paused, letting that sink in. Or you marry me instead of your stepsister. You become Mrs. Moretti. You live in luxury, want for nothing, and most importantly, you stay out of prison. That's not a choice, I whispered. That's blackmail. Yes, he didn't even pretend otherwise. It is. I tried to step back, but I was already against the chair, trapped, just like I'd always been trapped. First by my father's death, then by Victoria's cruelty, now by this beautiful monster who spoke of marriage like a business transaction. Why me? My voice cracked. If Isabel is such a disaster, why not just call off the engagement? Find someone else? Because I need that property by Friday, and I've already invested 6 months in this arrangement. I don't have time to start over. His expression remained impassive, but I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Calculation. You're perfect. Victoria will be thrilled to be rid of you. Isabel will be relieved she doesn't have to play the mafia wife. And you. He reached out, and I flinched, but he only brushed a strand of hair from my face with surprising gentleness. You get to live. Isn't that what you want? To finally stop merely surviving? His touch burned like a brand. I jerked away, my back hitting the bookshelf behind me. I need time to think. You have 30 seconds. He pulled his phone out again, his finger hovering over the screen. I can make 1 call, and by morning, the evidence against you will be ironclad. Victoria will have you arrested before breakfast. Or, he lowered the phone. You say yes, and I make the problem disappear? Your choice. 30 seconds. 30 seconds to decide the rest of my life. Prison or marriage to a mobster. Guilt for crimes I didn't commit. Or a gilded cage beside a man who looked at me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person. I thought of my tiny basement room. The hand-me-down clothes. Victoria's casual cruelty. Isabel's mocking laughter. 6 years of being invisible, being nothing, being less than the furniture. At least in prison, I'd be something. Even if that something was a criminal. But God, I didn't want to go to prison. I didn't want to spend my 20s behind bars, paying for sins that belonged to someone else. 20 seconds. Dante said quietly. How do I know you're telling the truth? I hated how desperate I sounded. About the evidence. About Victoria's plans. You don't. He slipped his phone back into his pocket. But you know your stepmother. You know Isabel. Deep down, you already know I'm telling the truth. He was right. Of course he was right. Victoria had been looking for an excuse to be rid of me for years. and Isabel was exactly the kind of person who would frame someone else for her crimes without losing a moment's sleep. 10 seconds. My hands were shaking. My whole body was shaking. "If I say yes," I whispered, "what happens? How does this even work?" "You say yes. I handle the rest. Victoria will be disappointed but pragmatic. The Moretti connection is worth more than her pride. Isabel will throw a tantrum, but ultimately won't care as long as she doesn't have to actually marry me." He moved closer again, and this time I had nowhere to retreat. "We'll marry within the week. You'll move into my home. You'll be protected, provided for. And most importantly, you'll be free of them. Free." The word tasted like a lie, but also like possibility. "Time's up, Olivia." His voice dropped to barely a whisper, intimate and terrifying. "What's it going to be?" I looked into those merciless dark eyes and saw my future reflected there. Not love, not kindness, but perhaps something more valuable than either. Escape. Yes. The word fell from my lips like a stone into still water, rippling out in consequences I couldn't begin to imagine. "I'll marry you." Something flashed across Dante's face. Triumph, satisfaction, something else I couldn't name. He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking in rapid Italian, too fast for me to follow. When he finished, he looked at me with an expression that might have been approval. "Smart girl." He walked to the door, opened it, and spoke to someone in the hallway. "Take Miss Chen to the car. Make sure she's comfortable." "Wait!" Panic surged through me. "What about the party? Victoria will be informed that there's been a change of plans. I'll handle her." He turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something almost like warmth in his eyes. Almost. "You've made your choice, Olivia. There's no going back now." The security guard from earlier appeared in the doorway, gesturing for me to follow. I moved on autopilot, my mind still trying to catch up with what I'd just agreed to. As I reached the door, Dante's voice stopped me. "Olivia." I turned back, and he was watching me with that intense, unreadable expression. "You won't regret this," he said. "I take care of what's mine." The possessiveness in those words should have terrified me. Maybe it did. But it also sent a strange thrill down my spine that I absolutely did not want to examine. I followed the guard through empty hallways, down a service elevator, and out into an underground parking garage where a black Mercedes with tinted windows waited. The guard opened the back door, and I slid inside, the leather seats cool against my trembling legs. The door closed, sealing me in. Through the window, I could see the building where the party continued above us, where Isabel was probably still showing off her ring, where Victoria was networking with Manhattan's elite, where my old life was ending without anyone even noticing. The driver's door opened, and Dante slid behind the wheel. I stared at him, confused. "Where's your driver?" I sent him ahead. He started the engine, the car purring to life. I prefer to drive myself sometimes, especially when I need to think. We pulled out of the garage and onto the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan. The city lights blurred past, neon and chrome, and 1,000 lives that had nothing to do with mine. "Where are we going?" My voice sounded small in the leather-scented darkness. "Somewhere safe." Dante's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "You'll stay at one of my properties tonight. Tomorrow we'll begin preparations for the wedding." Wedding. I was getting married. To this terrifying, beautiful stranger who'd bought me like property to solve a business problem. What the hell had I just done? The penthouse was a study in controlled luxury. All clean lines, dark wood, and floor-to-ceiling windows that turned Manhattan into a glittering backdrop. Dante led me through the entrance with a hand on the small of my back, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive, like he was already marking his territory. "The guest room is down that hallway," he said, gesturing to the left. "Second door. You'll find everything you need, clothes, toiletries." "My housekeeper anticipated your size." Of course he had a housekeeper who could predict a stranger's measurements. Of course he did. "I don't understand." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly freezing despite the warmth of the apartment. "How long have you been planning this?" Dante shrugged off his jacket, draping it over a chair with casual grace. Underneath, his white shirt was crisp and perfectly fitted, showing off broad shoulders and a lean, muscular build. since I realized Isabel was a liability. About 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks? The number hit me like a slap. You've been watching me for 3 weeks? I've been having you watched, yes. He moved to the bar and poured himself another whiskey, the amber liquid catching the city lights. I needed to know if you were worth the investment. If you were as invisible as you seemed. If you were strong enough to survive in my world. The casual admission made my skin crawl. You had me followed, investigated, extensively. He took a sip, his dark eyes never leaving mine. I know you work 2 jobs, the catering company and night shifts at a diner in Queens. I know you're putting yourself through community college online, studying literature of all impractical things. I know you haven't been on a date in over a year. I know Victoria keeps you in the basement and makes you hand over most of your paycheck for room and board. His voice took on a sharp edge. I know everything about you, Olivia, including the fact that you're stronger than you think you are. I should have been outraged, should have screamed, thrown something, demanded to be taken back. But instead, I felt a strange, twisted validation. Someone had been paying attention. Someone had seen me when I thought I was invisible. Even if that someone was a monster. I'm not strong, I said quietly. I'm just stuck. You're a survivor. Dante set down his glass and moved toward me with that predatory grace. There's a difference between being stuck and being strategic. You've been surviving in a hostile environment for 6 years, staying under the radar, biding your time. That takes intelligence, discipline. He stopped a foot away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. Those are qualities I value, qualities I need in a wife. A wife you're blackmailing into marriage. A wife I'm rescuing from prison. His correction was sharp. Don't romanticize your situation, Olivia. You weren't going to escape Victoria on your own. You were going to work yourself to death in that diner, scraping by on nothing, always one disaster away from homelessness. I'm offering you a way out. The truth of his words stung because he was right. I'd been so focused on surviving day to day that I'd never actually planned for a future. I'd been treading water, waiting for... What? A miracle? Prince Charming? I'd gotten the devil instead. Get some rest, Dante said, his voice softening fractionally. Tomorrow will be busy. We have a wedding to plan. I nodded numbly and walked down the hallway, my feet sinking into carpet so thick it felt like walking on clouds. The guest room was larger than my entire basement space at Victoria's. A king-sized bed with silk sheets, an ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub, and a walk-in closet already filled with clothes in exactly my size. I locked the door behind me, then immediately felt stupid. If Dante wanted to come in, a lock wouldn't stop him. Nothing would stop him. I stripped off the ill-fitting black dress and stood under the shower until my skin turned pink, trying to wash away the feeling of being watched, investigated, purchased. The water was hot and endless, so different from the lukewarm trickle I was used to at Victoria's house. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel softer than anything I'd ever owned, I found pajamas laid out on the bed, real silk, in a deep emerald green. I put them on and caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked different. The clothes fit. My skin glowed from the hot shower. My dark hair fell in damp waves around my shoulders, instead of being scraped back in the harsh bun Victoria insisted on. I looked almost pretty, almost like someone who could be a mafia boss's wife. The thought was so absurd I almost laughed. Almost. I climbed into the massive bed, expecting to lie awake all night, my mind spinning with terror and regret. But exhaustion pulled me under like a riptide, and I fell into a dreamless, heavy sleep. Morning came with gentle pressure on my shoulder, and a woman's voice speaking softly. Miss Chen? I'm sorry to wake you, but Mr. Moretti asked me to help you prepare for the day. I jolted awake, disoriented, my heart hammering. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came crashing back. The party, the library, the deal with the devil. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair smiled at me apologetically. I'm Elena, Mr. Moretti's housekeeper. I've prepared breakfast, and there are several outfits in the closet for you to choose from. Mr. Moretti will be ready to leave in an hour. Leave. My voice was rough with sleep. Where are we going? He didn't say, miss, but I suspect it involves preparations. Her smile turned knowing. Congratulations, by the way. Mr. Moretti has never brought a woman here before. You must be very special. Special. Right. Special like a chess piece was special, useful for a specific purpose, easily sacrificed when the game demanded it. Elena left me to get ready, and I forced myself out of bed. The closet held dozens of options. All designer labels I recognized from fashion magazines I'd flipped through during slow shifts at the diner. I chose a simple cream blouse and dark jeans. Practical, but elegant. When I emerged, Elena had set out breakfast on the balcony. Fresh fruit, pastries, coffee that smelled like heaven. The morning sun turned the city golden, and for a moment, I could almost pretend this was normal, that I was someone who belonged in penthouses and silk pajamas. Dante appeared as I was finishing my second cup of coffee, looking impossibly put together in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I'd made in 6 months. His hair was still slightly damp from a shower, and I caught a whiff of that dark, expensive cologne. Good. You're ready. His eyes swept over me, assessing. We have 4 stops today. First, the courthouse to expedite the marriage license, then my lawyer's office to sign the prenuptial agreement. After that, a jeweler for rings, and finally, a bridal boutique. My stomach dropped. Today? All of that today? I don't believe in wasting time. He pulled out his phone, already typing something. The wedding is Friday. That gives us 3 days to handle the logistics. 3 days. I was getting married in 3 days to a man I'd met less than 12 hours ago. What about Victoria? Isabel? The words tumbled out. Don't they need to be told? Already handled. Dante's expression was unreadable. I called Victoria this morning, explained that I'd reconsidered the arrangement and found you to be a more suitable match. She was surprisingly agreeable once I mentioned doubling the property value I was offering. Of course she was. Victoria had probably been thrilled to trade her unwanted stepdaughter for double the profit. And Isabel? Threw a tantrum as expected. Threatened to expose my criminal activities to the police. His lips curved into something cold and sharp. I reminded her that I have extensive documentation of her drug purchases, including several transactions that crossed state lines. Federal offenses. She became much more cooperative after that. The casual way he discussed blackmail and threats made my head spin. This was my life now. A world where laws were suggestions, and loyalty was bought with fear. Come. He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. His fingers were warm, his grip firm, but not crushing. Time to make this official. The courthouse was a blur of bureaucratic efficiency. Dante's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca, who looked like she could gut you with a smile, had already prepared everything. We filled out forms, showed identification, and within an hour, we had a marriage license with both our names on it. Olivia Chen, soon to be Moretti. The letters seemed to rearrange themselves every time I looked at them, refusing to make sense. Don't look so terrified, Rebecca said as we left the courthouse. She had a surprisingly warm smile for someone who worked for a crime boss. Dante's not as bad as his reputation suggests. He's actually quite protective of the people he considers his. Is that supposed to be comforting? I asked. It should be. She handed me a thick manila envelope. This is your prenuptial agreement. Read it carefully. You'll find Dante has been exceptionally generous. In the car, I opened the envelope with shaking hands. The prenup was dozens of pages of legal jargon, but certain phrases jumped out at me. Monthly allowance of $50,000, full access to all residential properties, education expenses covered in full. In the event of divorce, a settlement of $10 million. $10 million? I looked up at Dante, who was driving again, his eyes on the traffic. This can't be right. It's right. His voice was calm, matter of fact. I'm not a monster, Olivia. You're entering this marriage under duress. The least I can do is ensure you're taken care of. $50,000 a month is more than I make in a year. You'll need it. Being my wife comes with certain expectations. Wardrobe, social events, security costs. He glanced at me briefly. Considerate payment for services rendered. The clinical description stung more than it should have. What services? You said you didn't want— I couldn't finish the sentence, my face burning. I said I didn't want a wife who would embarrass me or steal from me, Dante corrected. I didn't say I didn't want a real wife. His dark eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, intense and heated. Make no mistake, Olivia, this will be a real marriage in every sense. I don't do anything halfway. The implication sent heat flooding through my body. Fear and something else I didn't want to name. I looked away, my heart pounding. The jewelry store was the kind of place that didn't have prices in the window, because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Dante was greeted by name, ushered into a private room with champagne and velvet chairs. We need wedding bands, he told the jeweler, an elegant man with silver hair, and an engagement ring, something that makes a statement. An hour later, I walked out wearing a platinum band and a diamond so large it felt obscene on my hand. The engagement ring was an emerald-cut stone surrounded by smaller diamonds, catching the light with every movement. It's too much, I whispered as we left. It's exactly enough. Dante's hand found the small of my back again, that possessive touch that was becoming familiar. You're going to be my wife. People need to see that you're valued, protected, mine. That word again. Mine. Like I was a possession, a thing he'd acquired. The bridal boutique was the final stop, and by then, I was exhausted. Emotionally, physically, spiritually drained. But the moment we walked in, a switch seemed to flip in Dante. He became focused, engaged, studying each dress the consultant brought out with the intensity of a general planning a battle. Not white, he said, dismissing a traditional gown, too innocent, and nothing with too much lace. She's elegant, not frilly. The consultant nodded, returning with an entirely different selection. Dante pointed to a dress in champagne silk, simple but stunning, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that flowed like water. That one. Let me see it on her. I disappeared into the dressing room, and the consultant helped me into the gown. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The dress fit like it had been made for me, highlighting curves I didn't know I had, the silk catching the light like liquid gold. I stepped out, and Dante's expression changed. Just for a moment, something flickered in those dark eyes. Heat, possession, approval. Perfect. His voice was rough. We'll take it. On the drive back to the penthouse, as the city lights began to glow in the gathering dusk, I finally found the courage to ask the question that had been burning in my chest all day. Why are you really doing this, Dante? I know it's about the property, but there has to be more. You could have found 100 other ways to get what you want. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands steady on the wheel. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. My father built an empire on the backs of people he didn't value. Soldiers, workers, wives, they were all expendable to him. Tools to be used and discarded. His jaw tightened. I'm not my father. When I commit to something, to someone, it's absolute. You're going to be my wife, Olivia. That means something to me, even if it doesn't mean anything to you yet. The vulnerability in those words took my breath away. For just a moment, the monster showed me something human underneath. It means something, I said quietly. I'm just not sure what yet. His eyes met mine in the mirror, and something passed between us. An understanding, maybe, or the beginning of one. You will, he promised. In time you will. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of preparations that left me dizzy and disoriented. Dante's world operated on a completely different frequency than anything I'd ever known. Private appointments, designers who came to the penthouse, phone calls in rapid Italian that I couldn't follow but understood, were about me. Elena became my constant companion, explaining the unspoken rules of Dante's world with patient kindness. Don't leave the penthouse without security. Don't answer the phone unless she screened it first. Don't trust anyone who claimed to be a friend until Dante confirmed it. It sounds like a prison, I said on Thursday afternoon, watching Manhattan sprawl below us from the balcony. It sounds like protection, Elena corrected gently. She was arranging flowers, white roses and dark greenery for tomorrow's ceremony. Mr. Moretti has enemies, Miss Chen. Many enemies. Once you become his wife, you become a target. He's not trying to control you. He's trying to keep you alive. The distinction felt thin, but I understood her point. This wasn't Victoria's cruelty disguised as concern. This was something else. A gilded cage, yes, but one built from genuine danger rather than spite. That evening, Dante returned home earlier than usual, finding me curled up on the couch with a book from his extensive library. He'd been gone most of the past 2 days, handling what he vaguely referred to as business, returning late at night when I was already in bed. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, Elena announced, disappearing into the kitchen with the efficiency of someone who knew when to make herself scarce. Dante loosened his tie and poured himself a drink, but instead of retreating to his office as he usually did, he sat down on the opposite end of the couch. Close enough to be present, far enough to not crowd me. "What are you reading?" His voice held genuine curiosity. I showed him the cover, a worn copy of Dante's Inferno. "I found it in your library. Seemed appropriate, given the circumstances." His lips twitched. Comparing me to the devil. Comparing myself to someone descending into hell, actually. I closed the book, meeting his dark gaze. "But I'm not sure if I'm Dante the Pilgrim, or one of the damned souls. Perhaps you're Beatrice." He swirled the whiskey in his glass, the amber liquid catching the lamplight. "The guide who leads him toward paradise." The literary reference surprised me. "You've read it?" My father insisted I read the classics. He had pretensions of being an educated man, despite the blood on his hands. Dante's expression darkened. "He named me after the poet, actually. Thought it would give our family legitimacy. Class." It was the most personal thing he'd ever shared with me. I found myself leaning forward, drawn by this glimpse of the man beneath the monster. "Did you hate him? Your father?" I hated what he represented, the waste, the unnecessary cruelty. He took a drink, his jaw tight. He ruled through fear and violence alone. No strategy, no vision, just brutality for its own sake. His eyes met mine, intense and searching. I rebuilt his empire into something sustainable, something that operates in the shadows but doesn't leave bodies in the streets. I'm still a criminal, Olivia. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I'm not him. The distinction mattered to him. I could see it in the set of his shoulders, the way his fingers tightened around the glass. "Tomorrow," he continued, his voice softer, "you're going to become my wife. After that, there's no going back. Not safely, anyway." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, holding my gaze with uncomfortable intensity. "I need you to understand what that means. My enemies will see you as leverage. My allies will test your loyalty. The FBI watches everything I do, waiting for me to slip up. You'll be scrutinized, investigated, possibly threatened. You're really selling this marriage," I said, trying for humor to cover my fear. "I'm being honest." His expression didn't waver. "But I'm also promising you this. I will protect you, with everything I have, with every resource at my disposal. Anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me. And trust me when I say that's not a pleasant experience. The casual threat should have terrified me. Instead, I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. Not love, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of trust." "Why me, Dante?" I asked again, the question I couldn't stop asking. "Really, you could have found someone more suitable, someone from your world who already understood the rules. Because you're genuine." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "Everyone in my world wears a mask. They perform, they manipulate, they calculate every word and gesture. But you..." He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek with surprising gentleness. "You don't know how to pretend. You're scared, and you don't hide it. You're angry, and it shows. You're real, Olivia. And that's so rare in my life that it's worth more than any strategic alliance." His touch sent electricity down my spine. I should have pulled away, should have maintained distance, protected myself. But I found myself leaning into his hand instead, craving the warmth, the connection. "I'm terrified," I whispered. "Of tomorrow. Of this life. Of you. Good." His thumb traced my lower lip, the gesture intimate and possessive. "Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you careful. But Olivia. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my skin. You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm a lot of things. Dangerous, ruthless, probably damned. But I keep my promises, and I promise to take care of you. The space between us had shrunk to nothing. I could count his eyelashes, see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, feel the heat radiating from his body. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I couldn't tell if it was from fear or something else entirely. Dinner is served. Elena's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Dante pulled back immediately, the moment shattering. But something had shifted between us. Some invisible line had been crossed. As we ate dinner in surprisingly comfortable silence, I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Hunger, possession, something almost tender. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Tomorrow I would marry a man I barely knew. Tomorrow my entire life would change in ways I couldn't begin to predict. A soft knock on my door made me sit up. Come in. Dante entered, still dressed in his shirt and slacks, though he'd removed his tie. He looked almost vulnerable in the dim light from the hallway. I couldn't sleep either, he said. I wanted to. He paused, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since I'd met him. I wanted to make sure you're okay, that you're not planning to run. Where would I run to? I pulled my knees to my chest. You've made sure I understand the consequences of backing out. That's not why I'm here. He moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bed with careful distance between us. I'm here because you looked scared at dinner and I don't want you to be afraid. Not of this. Not of me. The admission cost him something. I could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I am afraid, I admitted. But not just of you. I'm afraid of failing, of not being what you need me to be, of waking up one day and realizing I traded one prison for another. This isn't a prison. His hand found mine in the darkness, his fingers interlacing with mine. I know it feels that way right now, but Olivia, I'm giving you freedom, real freedom. Money, security, education, anything you want. The only thing I'm asking in return is loyalty. Be my wife, stand by my side, and I'll give you the world. What if I don't want the world? My voice cracked. What if I just want to be seen, to matter to someone? Dante's dark eyes locked onto mine, intense and unwavering. You matter to me, more than you should, considering we've known each other less than a week. But you do. He raised our joined hands, pressing his lips to my knuckles in a gesture that felt almost reverent. Tomorrow, when you walk toward me, when you say those vows, I want you to know that I see you, Olivia. I've always seen you. Tears burned behind my eyes. No one had ever said anything like that to me. No one had ever made me feel like I was worth seeing. Stay, I whispered before I could stop myself. Just stay for a while. I don't want to be alone tonight. He should have said no, should have maintained distance, kept things professional, but instead, he kicked off his shoes and stretched out on top of the covers beside me, leaving space but offering presence. Tell me about your father, he said quietly. Your real father, before Victoria. So I did. I told him about my dad's terrible jokes and his love of old movies. About how he used to dance with me in the kitchen while we made pancakes on Sunday mornings. About the car accident that took him from me when I was 17. And how Victoria had swooped in within months, erasing every trace of him from the house like he'd never existed. Dante listened without interrupting, his hand still holding mine in the darkness. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. He would have wanted better for you than Victoria, he finally said. Better than me, probably, but he would have wanted you to survive, to live, not just exist. I hope he would understand why you're doing this. I hope so too, I whispered. We lay there in comfortable silence, our hands joined, until my breathing evened out and sleep finally claimed me. The last thing I remembered was the warmth of his presence beside me and the strange, unexpected feeling of safety. Friday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. A perfect autumn day in Manhattan. The sky impossibly blue and cloudless. Elena woke me early, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Your wedding day, Miss Chen? Well, Your last few hours as Miss Chen anyway. She'd arranged for a stylist and makeup artist, both of whom descended on me with professional efficiency. My hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, my makeup subtle but transformative. When I finally put on the champagne silk dress, even I had to admit I looked beautiful. "Mr. Moretti is going to lose his mind when he sees you," the stylist said with a knowing smile. The ceremony was being held in the penthouse. Just a handful of people. Elena, Rebecca the lawyer, two of Dante's most trusted security guards who would serve as witnesses, and a judge who'd been convinced, bribed probably, to perform a private ceremony. No family, no friends. Just the bare minimum required by law. It should have been depressing. Instead, it felt oddly intimate. Dante was waiting in the living room, the furniture pushed back to create a makeshift aisle lined with white roses. He wore a black suit that looked like it cost more than a car, his hair perfectly styled, his face carefully composed, but when he saw me, his composure cracked. Just for a second, his eyes widened, his breath caught, and something raw and hungry flashed across his features before he locked it down. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world who mattered. I walked toward him on trembling legs, my heart in my throat. When I reached him, he took my hands, and I felt the slight tremor in his fingers, the only sign that he was as nervous as I was. The judge began speaking, the words washing over me in a blur. I heard myself repeat vows I barely processed, felt Dante's hands steady and warm around mine. When it came time to exchange rings, he slid the platinum band onto my finger with such gentleness, it made my eyes burn. "I, Dante Alessandro Moretti, take you, Olivia Marie Chen, to be my wife," he said, his voice low and fierce. "I promise to protect you, to honor you, and to never let anyone hurt you again. This I swear on everything I am." The intensity in his eyes stole my breath. These weren't just legal vows. This was a promise, a claim, a declaration of possession that was somehow also a gift. When it was my turn, my voice shook, but held. "I, Olivia Marie Chen, take you, Dante Alessandro Moretti, to be my husband. I promise to stand by you, to trust you, and to try to see the man beneath the monster." His lips twitched at that last part. Something warm and almost amused flickering in his dark eyes. "You may kiss the bride," the judge announced. Dante's hands came up to cut my face with devastating gentleness. He gave me a moment to pull away, to refuse, but I didn't. I closed the distance between us, and his lips met mine in a kiss that was nothing like I'd imagined. It was soft at first, almost reverent. Then his hand slid to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, and the kiss deepened into something hungry and claiming. He kissed me like he was branding me, marking me as his in front of witnesses and God, and anyone else who might dare challenge his claim. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and dizzy, my lips swollen, and my heart racing. "Mine," he whispered against my mouth, so quietly only I could hear. Finally mine. And despite everything, the blackmail, the fear, the insanity of marrying a stranger, I felt something click into place in my chest. Maybe I was his, but maybe, just maybe, he was becoming mine too. The small reception that followed was surprisingly warm, despite its intimate size. Elena had prepared a meal that could have graced a Michelin star restaurant, and Rebecca brought champagne that probably cost more than my old monthly rent. Even the security guards relaxed slightly, offering genuine congratulations that felt almost friendly. But the entire time, I felt Dante's eyes on me, possessive, heated, unwavering. Every time someone spoke to me, his hand found my waist, my back, my shoulder. Small touches that broadcast ownership to everyone in the room. "You're doing it again," I murmured during a quiet moment, our guests occupied with dessert. "Doing what?" His fingers traced lazy circles on my lower back, the touch burning through the silk of my dress. "Touching me. Constantly. Like you're afraid I'll disappear if you stop." "Maybe I am." His voice was low, intimate, meant only for me. "You're my wife now, Olivia. I have every right to touch you, and I intend to exercise that right frequently." Heat flooded through me at the promise in his words. This was my wedding night, our wedding night. And despite the unconventional circumstances, despite barely knowing each other, I felt anticipation coiling in my stomach rather than fear. The guests left as the sun began to set, painting Manhattan in shades of gold and crimson. Elena squeezed my hand on her way out, whispering, "Be patient with him. Underneath all that armor, he's just a man who's never had anyone choose to stay." Then we were alone. Truly alone for the first time as husband and wife. Dante stood at the window, his jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle and marked with scars. He looked dangerous and beautiful, and utterly overwhelming. "I should change," I said, suddenly nervous. "This dress is perfect." He turned, his dark eyes pinning me in place. "You're perfect. But yes, get comfortable. We need to talk." The words doused my rising nerves with cold water. We need to talk. Nothing good ever followed those words. I changed into silk pajamas, emerald green, another set Elena had chosen, and found Dante on the balcony, 2 glasses of wine waiting. The city spread below us, a carpet of lights and life and possibilities. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair beside him. I sat, accepting the wine with shaking hands. "You're scaring me. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. But there are things you need to know now that you're officially Mrs. Moretti." He took a long drink, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. "Tomorrow morning, I'm taking you to the Brooklyn property, the one I acquired through our marriage. It's going to be renovated into a community center. Education programs, job training, resources for families." I stared at him, confused. "I don't understand. I thought you needed it for criminal purposes. I needed it away from Victoria because she was going to sell it to developers who would turn it into luxury condos, displacing hundreds of families." His jaw tightened. "My mother grew up in that neighborhood. It's where I spent my summers before she died. I've been trying to acquire that property for 2 years, but Victoria refused every offer. She only agreed when I offered marriage to Isabel." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "So this was never about, you don't actually need a wife for your criminal empire?" "Oh, I do." He turned to face me fully, "but not for the reasons you assumed. I need someone I can trust, someone who isn't connected to the families, the old alliances, the inherited grudges. Someone who sees me as a man, not just a name and a reputation." His hand covered mine on the chair arm. "I need you, Olivia, not because you're convenient, but because you're real." Tears burned behind my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why let me think?" "Because you never would have believed me." His thumb stroked over my knuckles. "If I'd approached you with pretty words and promises, you would have assumed I was lying. The only way you'd believe this marriage could work was if you thought I needed something from you." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "But the truth is, I don't need your stepmother's property. I wanted it, yes. But I need you. There's a difference." "I don't understand." My voice cracked. "You barely know me. I know you work 2 jobs to pay for an online degree that won't get you anywhere because you love learning for its own sake. I know you give half your tips to the single mother who works breakfast shifts at the diner. I know you've been invisible your whole life, and you've convinced yourself that's what you deserve." His dark eyes burned into mine. "I know you're stronger than you believe, kinder than you should be after everything you've survived, and brave enough to marry a monster to avoid prison." "You're not a monster," I whispered. "Yes, I am." He didn't flinch from the truth, "But maybe I can be your monster. The one who protects you instead of hurting you." The words hung between us, heavy with promise and possibility. I thought about my empty life before this. The basement room, the hand-me-downs, the constant invisibility. I thought about waking up this morning as Olivia Chen, nobody and nothing, and standing here now as Olivia Moretti, wife to one of the most dangerous men in New York. "What happens now?" I asked. "What do you want from this marriage?" "Everything." He said it without hesitation. "I want a real partnership. I want someone to come home to who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm being an asshole. I want late-night conversations and shared meals, and someone who sees past the reputation to the man underneath." His hand slid to cup my cheek. "And yes, Olivia, I want you in my bed. I want to learn every sound you make." every place that makes you shiver, every way to make you forget the world exists except for us. My breath caught at the raw desire in his voice. I couldn't finish the sentence, my face burning. Understanding flickered in his eyes. Never? I shook my head, mortified. I dated in high school before my dad died. But after Victoria, there was never time, never opportunity, never anyone who saw me as worth the effort. Something fierce and possessive crossed his face. Good. The word was almost a growl. Then I get to be your first, your only. No one else's touch to erase, no comparisons to worry about. Just you and me, figuring this out together. He stood, pulling me up with him, his hands settling on my waist. But not tonight. You're overwhelmed, exhausted, and I'm not going to rush this. When I take you to bed, Olivia, I want you desperate for it, begging for it, not doing it because you think it's expected. The promise sent heat pooling low in my belly. What if I already want it? His control cracked, just for a moment. His fingers tightened on my waist, his eyes going dark and hungry. Don't tempt me, wife. I'm barely holding on to my restraint as it is. Then don't. I didn't recognize my own voice. Husky, confident, wanting. Hold on, I mean. You said this is a real marriage, so make it real. For 3 heartbeats, he just stared at me. Then he moved, fast and fluid, his mouth crashing down on mine with nothing gentle about it. This kiss was possession, and claiming and barely leashed hunger. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my head back to deepen the kiss, his tongue sweeping into my mouth with devastating skill. I gasped against his lips, my fingers clutching at his shirt, and he used the opportunity to lift me, my legs automatically wrapping around his waist. He carried me inside without breaking the kiss, navigating through the penthouse with the ease of someone who knew every inch of his territory. His bedroom was all dark wood and masculine elegance, dominated by a massive bed with black silk sheets. He laid me down with surprising gentleness, following me down, his body covering mine with delicious weight. Last chance to say no, he murmured against my throat, his teeth grazing my pulse point. Because once I start, I'm not going to want to stop. Then don't stop. I arched into him, craving more contact, more of everything. Please, Dante. I'm tired of being invisible. Make me real. Something shifted in his expression, the last of his control burning away, replaced by raw need and possessive hunger. You're already real to me, sweetheart. But I'm going to spend the rest of the night making sure you feel it. And he did. He took his time, learning my body with hands and mouth, and whispered praise that made me feel beautiful, desired, cherished. He was patient with my inexperience, guiding me through sensations I'd never imagined, taking pleasure in my responses. And when he finally made me his in truth, when the last barrier between us shattered and I cried out his name into the darkness, I felt something fundamental shift in my chest. This wasn't just physical. This was binding, claiming, the forging of something that went deeper than mere attraction. Afterward, I lay in his arms, my head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, and I'd never felt so safe in my life. No regrets? He asked quietly. Not about this. I pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. Maybe about the blackmail, probably about the terrifying criminal empire, but not about you. His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. I can live with that. He tilted my chin up, his dark eyes serious. I meant what I said earlier, Olivia. You matter to me. This matters. And I'm going to spend every day proving that to you. Even when I'm difficult? When I argue with you or make mistakes or... Especially then. He kissed me softly, a promise against my lips. I don't want a perfect wife. I want a real one. Flaws, arguments, mistakes, and all. 3 months later, I stood in the community center, formerly Victoria's property, now transformed into something meaningful, watching kids from the neighborhood participate in after-school programs Dante had funded. Music lessons, art classes, tutoring, job skills, training for their parents. You did this, I said, leaning back against his chest as his arms wrapped around my waist. You're changing lives. We did this. His lips brushed my temple. You're the one who designed the programs, who hired the staff, who makes this place work. It was true. Over the past months, I'd discovered a purpose I never knew I needed. I'd enrolled in real college classes, not online but in person at Columbia, studying social work. I'd made friends with the staff at the center, with some of Dante's associates' wives who turned out to be surprisingly normal once you got past the designer clothes and security details. I'd built a life. A real life. Victoria called again, I mentioned. 6th time this month, I felt Dante's body tense. What did she want? Money, probably, or to guilt me into giving Isabel another chance. I turned in his arms, looping my hands behind his neck. I didn't answer. I don't owe her anything anymore. Pride flickered in his eyes. Look at you, Mrs. Moretti. Standing up to your demons. I learned from the best. I kissed him softly. Plus, it's easier to be brave when I know you'll destroy anyone who hurts me. Damn right I will. His hand slid down to my hips, pulling me closer. You're mine to protect, mine to cherish, mine to love. The L word still made my heart skip. We'd been dancing around it for weeks, both feeling it, but neither quite ready to say it first. Until now. I love you too, I whispered against his lips. My beautiful monster. He kissed me then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath mingling with mine. Take me home, I murmured. Our home. Because that's what the penthouse had become. Not a prison, not a gilded cage, but home. A place where I was seen, valued, where I'd transformed from invisible girl to powerful woman, where I'd married a monster and discovered he had a heart that beat just for me. As we drove through Manhattan, the city lights painting us in shades of gold and shadow, I thought about that terrified girl at the engagement party 3 months ago. The one who'd thought her life was over when Dante Moretti looked at her across a crowded room. She'd been wrong. Her life hadn't ended that night. It had finally, truly begun. And as Dante's hand found mine, our wedding rings catching the light, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was real. We were real, and that was worth everything.